is 3, lesson 3, summarize. And, again, it's something that we've seen a few times. And as I just mentioned, we're actually going to, apply a new skill set by actually doing just a little bit of writing today. And as we've already seen a few times with summarizing, by the time we complete this lesson, we'll be able to summarize, restate in your own words the main points of a passage, and distinguish important details from unimportant details, which is the entire gist of summarizing, right? It's blocking out the noise and just getting to those main points. And I was thinking about this earlier. Who's really bad at summarizing is children, right? If like you ask a 5 or 6 year old to tell you about their favorite movie or television show or book, and you're going to get all the details, right? You give a little bit of candy and sugar them up, and they're just going to go. And so you're sitting there going, yeah, okay, yeah. They learn later. That's one of the skills that they have to learn, is to sort of paraphrase, put things in their own words, and pull out the more important details, leaving the rest. And that's one of the important things, right? Is actually understanding what's going to be important and what's not. So let's take a look at our audio.
To summarize means to restate briefly in your own words the main points of a passage or a visual element. When reading about historical events, you will often be presented with a great deal of detailed information. By summarizing, you can determine which details are important and which are unimportant for understanding events and their relationships to one another. As with other areas of the GED test, questions about summarizing will test your ability to interpret information at various depth of knowledge levels through the use of complex reading skills and thinking skills.
It's that's why it's so important. I think the things that we keep running into here, as far as summarizing or compare and contrast, those elements are really important skill sets for critical thinking, and particularly for test taking and things like that. And when you're going to have a lot of reading and being able to read through something. And that's why I was asking you guys if you have some paper today, while I read, just to not sort of jot down some of the main points as we go along. And what like I said, weeding through the noise, canceling out the noise and just getting to the main points. And that's going to be really important when it comes to particularly writing, which you're going to have to do, in social studies and, in the language arts in particular. You'll have a sort of a longer writing assignment to do on the GED test. So being able to sort of get to the main ideas and summarize is going to be really important to help you get through the test. Okay. So our text passage here, and again, along the way, the other part of that is not just the skill sets that we're building, but also getting that historical information or getting that civics information to go along with it to help build your your prior knowledge. So when we talk about events and everything, you'll have that recollection, and you will get asked some of that as far as inferences and things like that goes. So the context is also important. So I want to make sure that that's always that we're aware of that as well. Not just that we're learning to summarize, but also what we're summarizing is going to be important as well. So our text here, it says the Magna Carta is a political document written in 1215, in which the relationship between the English king and his feudal lords is clarified. The document was written almost 1,000 years ago, but it is still important today. The Magna Carta is the foundation of many important rights held by the people of Great Britain and the United States. The English feudal lords had several grievances against their king concerning the way justice was administered and the abuse of his power over them. Facing a revolt by the lords, the king agreed to limits on his power. For example, the king agreed that no free man shall be seized or imprisoned or stripped of his rights or possessions, or outlawed or exiled, except by the lawful judgment of his equals or by the law of the land. To no one will we deny or delay right or justice. Within this section of the Magna Carta, scholars see the roots of the right to trial by jury and a statement on individual freedom and rights. It also contains the idea, unusual for its time, that even a ruler is subject to the law. The Magna Carta was an early step towards establishing a parliamentary democracy. Parliamentary democracy is a system of government in which the power to make and carry out laws was held by Parliament and not the king. This paved way for the later development of our American constitutional democracy. And underlined here, it says the relationship between the English king and his feudal lords is clarified. So a main point, as it says in the text box, look for the main points in a passage and think of ways to state them in your own words. So, and typically, as we've talked about in language arts, as far as like main points go and topic sentences and paragraphs, it's usually going to be towards the top. And right here at the top, that's what we have. The relationship between the English king and his feudal lords is clarified. That is the document, the Magna Carta, and then what it establishes. So the next underlined section there under B says the English feudal lords had several grievances against their king concerning the way justice was administered and the abuse of his power over them. So it says, when summarizing, leave out details that lack significance or importance. Instead, concentrate on details that are important for understanding the main point of the passage. So right there, the two that we have underlined are really important. So the first one being what the Magna Carta was about. The Magna Carta was a political document that clarified the relationship between the English king and his feudal lords. That's, that could be your first sentence of a summary. And, you ask yourself those questions, when, where, what, why, how. So we have this establishment of the Magna Carta and clarification of those, the feudal lords and their English king. Why was that necessary? And that's going to be one of your first big points. So then you look at that second box, or the second underlined section there. The English feudal lords had several grievances against their king concerning the way justice was administered and the abuse of his power over them. And there's, basically your first two sentences, and you can, weeding out everything else and picking out what's important there. Everything in between there, the details all in all are important. But as far as, we don't need to worry about the document, when it was written necessarily. The year is kind of important. You can put that in, but we don't need to say something about almost 1,000 years ago, but it's still important today. All of that else, all that other stuff is not as relevant as those points that they're making here, the underlined section. The relationship between the English king and the feudal lords was clarified in the Magna Carta due to concerns between the way justice was administered and the abuse of the power of the king. And that's basically paraphrasing what's there. So that's going to be pretty much the exercise for today, is looking at some other passages and thinking about that. So let's go to the quiz. Unit 3, Lesson 3. And also, like I said, the Magna Carta was important, as it pointed out. That's something else you could put in your. So you have your main idea of what the Magna Carta established. This clarification between the king and the feudal lords. The next being, the reason for it was the grievances between the feudal lords and their king. And then you point out some of the major ideas within the document. So the idea that no free man shall be seized or imprisoned or stripped of his rights or possessions, outlawed or exiled. You could paraphrase that, shorten it up, just get to the main points. And then finally, it also established that the king would also be held accountable under a system of government. That was the other point of the Magna Carta, that they are not all powerful, that they are not the absolute power in any government. And so it says in our box, that using logic, so use logic to classify information as a main idea or as a detail. So we just talked about. Think about whether each piece of information is the dominant theme of the passage or a specific fact that supports a larger point. And that's what we just did, right? We said what the Magna Carta was about, why it was necessary, and then those specific few details. And the other thing to remember, right? If you're taking a test, if you're summarizing, your summary should always be shorter than the length of the passage. So it's something like this where you have, sort of 3 short paragraphs. A summary should only be maybe about the size of that first paragraph. About 4 sentences. That would be a summary. That's the other way, whether or not you're running too long or too short. Look at the size of the text you're reading. If you start running too long, you may need to think about the details you have and shortening it up. Okay, and we have one multiple choice question before we get to the writing bit. So Etta, you want to answer question 1 for us? Nope, not hearing from Etta. How about Tracy? Would you like
I didn't know I was muted. Sorry.
It's okay.
I was talking and I'm like, what do you mean I'm not saying anything?
Okay. All right, go ahead with number 1 then.
Oh, so which of the following statements provides the best summary of the passage? Is it C?
The Magna Carta ensured the rights of kings or their feudal subjects. It's B. B as in boy, right? So the Magna Carta was an important step in developing the concept of individual rights. And that would be probably like a final point that you would make in your summary. So yeah, it would actually be the opposite. Actually ensured the feudal rights of subjects over their king. So yeah, B as in boy for number 1. Okay. And yeah, so here we're going to have a long passage. I want you guys to focus on thinking about the main points. I'm going to read through it nice and slow. And this is where, if you have something to write down some of the main ideas as we get to them. And then what we're going to do here, I'll go ahead and show you the question, right? So we understand what it is we're looking for and what it's asking. So it's just write a summary of the information presented in the passage above. In your response, analyze the argument states had for, oh, okay, I see what I'm saying. Analyze the arguments states had for supporting or opposing the ratification of the new Constitution. Incorporate relevant and specific evidence from the passage, as well as your own knowledge of the circumstances surrounding the ratification of the new Constitution to support your analysis. And it says it'll take about 25 minutes. If you were to have that on a test, we'll probably get through it a little quicker here. But so, and then the directions are read the information and the question, and then write your answer in the space below. Now it's telling us to refer to language arts, things that we haven't gotten to yet in Unit 3 and Unit 4. But we will revisit this again, and it's going to be a lot of help as we get to that point where you're going to be writing a little more. And it says, the workbook and everything, but this all will apply to your extended response that you write for language arts later. Okay, so let me start here. In the summer of 1787, delegates from 12 states met in Philadelphia to try to correct problems with the Articles of Confederation, making them more workable for the new nation. The delegates decided that the articles were too weak and imperfect to be fixed, so they created a new plan, one with a much stronger federal government. That September, the new constitution they had written was submitted to each of the states for ratification. Only 9 of the 13 states had to ratify the new constitution for it to go into effect. Many people opposed the Constitution, however, citing the fact that it did not protect individual rights against a now more powerful federal government. A few states, such as Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, ratified the Constitution within a few months. However, several states refused to ratify the document without protections for individual rights. Several other states did approve, but with the understanding that a Bill of Rights would be added. The Constitution went into effect when New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify it on June 21st, 1788. Even so, several large states were still holdouts, including Virginia, New York, and North Carolina. They eventually approved the Constitution, but with very close votes. The last holdout, Rhode Island, did not ratify the Constitution until 1790, after all other states had done so. So, thinking about summarizing that, what is the main idea here? What's the main point we're looking at?
The Constitution.
Creation of the Constitution, right? That's sort of the main idea, how we got from the Articles of Confederation to the, I'm going to get my own piece of paper here to write on, creation of the Constitution. So we're getting some history of how that came about. Also important, who was involved, right? Who are the players here? So it was the delegates from 12 states, right? They met in Philadelphia. So 12 delegates. Oh, I'm sorry. Delegates from 12 states. There was more than 12 delegates, but it was delegates from 12 states. Okay, so that's our who. The other details, right, was that, was the why. Why were they meeting in Philadelphia? Initially to
Correct problems with the Articles of Confederation.
boom, there you go, right? Problems, or to you could say to fix problems with the Articles of Confederation. All right, so we're moving right along, right? So the idea that it's 12 delegates, I keep saying that, delegates from 12 states met in Philadelphia to fix problems with the Articles of Confederation. And then, so instead of fixing the articles, what happens? What do they decide?
That it was too weak and imperfect to be fixed.
Right.
So they created a new plan.
There you go. So the articles were garbage, too weak, not fixable. And so they create the Constitution. And you could say that was an important detail, right, which we always talk about between the Articles of Confederation and the U.S. Constitution, was that the Constitution was, gave power to a stronger central government. So create the Constitution with a stronger federal government. That is an important point, right? Okay, and So far, right, we have the delegates from 12 states meet in Philadelphia to improve create the Articles of Confederation, decide it was too weak and not fixable. So they create the Constitution with stronger federal government. And then what happens after that? What else is important here? How do the states feel about it individually?
Is it that they did not protect individual rights against the powerful? I don't.
Okay, so there we go. So many, like it says, many people opposed the Constitution, citing the fact that it did not protect individual rights against now more powerful federal government. So we could just say, not necessarily have to, point out which states, ratified it. That's more of a specific detail. So we're, thinking about generalizing and summarizing. So we know a few states ratified the Constitution within a few months. We could say a few states ratified. And then other states opposed, and then that specific detail why they opposed it, right? Which would be lack of protection for individual rights. No protection for individual rights. Okay. And so how do they resolve that then? That would be basically probably our final point to make, because we do get it ratified. So what happens to ensure that it gets passed?
They vote. Hold on. They eventually approved the Constitution, but with very close votes. The last did not ratify.
What was the point that got them to approve it? What was going to be added? The Bill of Rights, right?
Yeah.
So that was the protection, and that's like this final cause and effect, right? With the addition of the Bill of Rights, then you get enough states to ratify it and pass it. Okay, so my eyes are itchy today. Okay, so that would be so over time. So there's a little bit of passage of time that you should recognize, but again, we don't have to get into 1787 is enough of a date. We don't have to say in the summer of or on this particular date. We can just say within months or things like that, or just May 1790 when we get to something like that. But specific dates not necessary. So over time, the states ratified the Constitution with the promise of a Bill of Rights or something along those lines. So like it says, with an understanding of the Bill of Rights would be included. Okay. So same thing with the summary, just like in the body of a text or in a paragraph, right? You're going to have your main idea, supporting details, and then like a resolution, something as far as a conclusion or closing. You know, we're thinking about this in terms of a full paragraph. So let's go down here. We're going to click in our box. Okay, we've got all kinds of fun tools down here. I'm going to use Times New Roman because that's what historians use. Okay. So we start off with, you know, our topic sentence, our main idea. So we could say in, hope, is my text big enough? Can you guys all see what I'm writing here? So you can follow along. I might try to make it a little larger for everybody. Okay. So we'll just start off with, you know, that date, like in summer of 1787 or in 1787. That's the important date. So delegates met in Philadelphia. To improve the Articles of Confederation. Period. Right, there's our percent. There's one of the main ideas, right? Why were they in Philadelphia? 1787 delegates met in Philadelphia to improve the Articles of Confederation. So then how do we get to the Constitution, right? Which is sort of the main idea here, right? The idea that they were creating the Constitution. So the delegates, let's see. Let's see. Want to put in something about the situation with the Articles of Confederation, right? And how the delegates were concerned about it. How about here we go. So delegates found the decided. Delegates decided that the Articles of Confederation were too weak and you can always go back and take a look to see, you know, as far as word choice or getting ideas. So, you know, we don't necessarily have to put both too weak and imperfect to be fixed. So we could just say delegates decided the Articles were too weak and created a new plan with a stronger federal government. So just consider how much we've already sort of put into our own words and summarized, you know, almost that entire first paragraph, right? That's the main point. So we don't have to really worry about, the new Constitution they had written was submitted to each state for, well, we'll need to sort of approach that somehow, but we can just jump into like just the ratification itself. So we could say, and we don't have to be, we don't have to say exactly how many states. It's just the summary. So we could say several states, which would imply that there was so many states that it wasn't going to get ratified, right? Several states refused to ratify the new U.S. Constitution. Since we haven't mentioned it by name, at some point you actually need to mention the name of the document. So the new U.S. Constitution. Okay. And then what's next? We need something as far as why, right? So why did they refuse to ratify the U.S. Constitution? No protection for individual rights, right? So these, let's see. Oh, you know what? We can make this one complex sentence. So let's erase that period there. Several states refused to ratify the new U.S. Constitution without protection for individual rights. Everybody following along there?
I'm trying to catch up. Okay.
Take your time. I'm gonna give you guys a minute right here. Capri, I see you. We're working on a summary on the passage on number 2. We're in Unit 3, Lesson 3, summarizing, and we're in the quiz. So if you want to pop into that, and okay. And I was just helping them. We read through the passage, and we were pulling out main ideas, main details, and sort of a conclusion. And now we're working on writing the summary. Okay. So what we got so far is in 1787, delegates met in Philadelphia to improve the Articles of Confederation. The delegates decided that the Articles of Confederation were too weak and created a new plan with a stronger federal government. Several states refused to ratify the new U.S. Constitution without protection for individual rights. So the next maybe sentence, we really only need maybe one more to wrap it up. And that's just going to point out that, right, with the Bill of Rights added, the rest of the states followed along. And then maybe, put something in as far as its ratification in 1788. So let's see here. So just generalizing, we put in time, comma. Oh, well, let's say we want to make a distinction between what's the last state wrote. Rhode Island was the last state. Yeah. How about this? So in time, more states ratified the Constitution. Always capitalize Constitution because it's an official document. It's talking about a specific document when we say, you know, capital C, Constitution. With the
inclusion of the Bill of Rights.
Bloom, that's good. Inclusion of the bill, once again, capitalized Bill of Rights, not the of, but the bill and right part. With the inclusion of the Bill of Rights,
You can put in, you said it was in 17 something, I'm sorry. You put the
yeah,
date in there.
I'm going to put in, so we're going to put with the inclusion of the Bill of Rights, we want to mention that it protects individual liberties, since that was the concern. So with the inclusion of the Bill of Rights protecting individual liberties. Oh, I can spell. I-N-D-I-P-I. Oh, P-I-E.
States ratify
Liberties.
the Constitution.
Okay. And so we could just put the Constitution went into effect on June 21st, 1788. And that's it. Not necessarily important that we put Rhode Island in there, being the last state. What's really important, right, is that when it went into effect and why. So reading through here, what we have in summary, in 1787, delegates met in Philadelphia to improve the Articles of Confederation. The delegates decided that the Articles of Confederation were too weak and created a new plan with a stronger federal government. Several states refused to ratify the new U.S. Constitution without protection for individual rights. In time, more states ratified the Constitution with the inclusion of the Bill of Rights protecting individual liberties. The Constitution went into effect on June 21st, 1788. So how do y'all feel about that? Have we hit all the points? Okay. And, you know, like I was saying, it should be, you know, brief as possible, making sure that you get all the main points. So, you know,
I just see the bottom. The
oh yeah,
rest
yeah,
of
yeah.
it.
Yeah, let me just leave it there for you guys. So you can get all that while I'm reviewing here. So, you know, the when, what, why, and hows, right? You need to get all those in the summary and nothing more, right? You just get to the main points. We're not 5 or 6 years old, full of candy and trying to tell somebody about the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution. Nobody has time for that. So, and again, this is, you know, the idea here is like, this is what you'd want to remember with any passage that you read, you know, whether it's, you know, just reading comprehension, when you're summarizing, whatever it is, right? If you could take away this much information from that, you know, 2 or 3 paragraphs, you're moving in the right direction, right? So the what? We had delegates meeting in Philadelphia to improve the Articles of Confederation. Why? Because delegates decided, you know, that it was too weak. We don't need to say that specifically because we say they were going to improve it, right? So we know that the Articles of Confederation needed work. So delegates met in Philadelphia to improve the Articles of Confederation. What happened? The delegates decided that the Articles of Confederation were too weak and created a new plan with a stronger federal government. What happens next? Several states refused to ratify the new Constitution without protection for individual rights. Why was that the case? because they didn't have right. It didn't have protection for individual rights. That was refusal. We got that all in one sentence there. Several states refused because of lack of protection for individual rights. In time, more states ratified the Constitution. Why? Because of the inclusion of the Bill of Rights protecting individual liberties. What was the final outcome? The Constitution went into effect on June 21st, 1788. There's a summary for you. Okay. How's everybody doing? We need any more time here?
I'm almost done. Effect.
Okay. No rush. We've got a few more of these in the workbook. So
21st, 19, 2017. Okay.
good to go. Okay. Now I'm going to submit this. It's, it doesn't grade it like it does our fill in the blank and multiple choice stuff, but I want to point out a few things because it has a very lengthy rubric that it uses to grade. And basically it's going to show you how things are graded and what we should have included in there. So, right, there's our first question, which was B. So that's the answer for number 1. And if we scroll down here, what we're going to see, there's our answer in a little box. And everything under here is going to outline basically what we should have included and how it's going to be scored. So at the top, to get all 3 points on that, a response earning 3 points would clearly identify the enduring issue as the beginnings of a stronger federal government with guarantees of individual rights. We did that, right? Summary should include the following. So right here it says in 1787, delegates met in Philadelphia to overhaul the Articles of Confederation. Basically what we said, right? To fix the Articles of Confederation. Instead, they created a new constitution with a stronger federal government. We hit that mark. When the document was submitted to the states for approval, many of them refused to sign because the new constitution did not protect individual rights from the powers of a stronger federal government. That's kind of nitpicky, but we did mention, right, that there was no protection from, there was no protection of individual rights, right? That's the important part there. And then eventually the states passed the new constitution with the understanding that a Bill of Rights would be added to guarantee individual rights. So we got all that, right? We added a little bit more as far as when it was passed, but I think that's also part of it should be part of the conclusion, right? That we need to make sure that it's understand that it did pass. And our rubric here, right? How you're going to get those points on a writing response. So it says extended response traits, explanation of traits, depth of knowledge. So composing an appropriate response for this item requires a variety of complex reasoning skills, which we used. Test takers must present their ideas logically and support their claim with evidence. So, you got to keep referencing what's in the text, right? We're not going to start talking about, knitting or something in our summary. Stick to the points. Accurately and adequately incorporating elements from the text into the presentation of one's own ideas demands complex reasoning and planning. So with the one thing that you want to make sure that you're doing too is putting them in your own words, right? You're not going to copy and paste sentences from the text and put them into your own, into your own writing. Paraphrasing. This is where students all the time get in trouble with plagiarism when they're writing papers because they lift full sentences from, something that they're reading and put it into their, papers. And I just catch it all the time when I was grading student papers at OU, and they don't even realize they're doing it most of the time. So always think about putting it into your own words. Even if it's, just like what they had there, they used overhaul, we used fixed or improve, so that's important. Make sure that you're doing that. So the next one, creation of arguments and use of evidence. Exactly what we did, right? So generate a text-based argument that demonstrates a clear understanding of the relationship among ideas, events, and figures as presented in the source text. It may not, we're going to get to a better argument, right? This was more informational. The next one we're going to do when we get to the workbook, we're going to talk about Thomas Paine, and we'll see more of an argument presented. But you want to make sure that you understand the argument. And then specific evidence from primary and secondary source text that accurately supports an argument or is well connected. This is really getting into the nitty gritty of a longer sort of writing response. But basically, if you're just if you don't do any of that, then you're not going to get points. So you need to make sure that you continuously are referencing the passage that you're reading. You don't really go above and beyond the boundaries of that. We don't need to start talking about the Federalist Papers and things like that when we're talking about just the creation of the Constitution. Stick with what's there. You don't have to add a bunch of other stuff. And you're only hitting the main points. And then, you're not going to get any points if there's no clarity, there's, a lot of grammatical errors and things like that, misspellings. And it just, you just don't have a logical progression of ideas and information there. So that's basically what that last part is. So how's everybody feeling about summarizing? We move on to the workbook.
I'm feeling pretty good. I do have a quick question. If
Sure.
we did want to reference the passage and not plagiarize, we can quote the passage word for word as long as we put it in quotations and reference what paragraph we got it from.
Yeah, that's exactly what you need to do, right? In this case, Capri, since you're only dealing with one passage, right? You just have to put your quotation marks because that indicates that you are referencing that passage, right? If it was multiple passages or something, then you need to say, like I know you're familiar with the writing response, right? Like the passage A and passage B from language arts.
Yes.
Yeah, so if it was something where you would have more than one source of information, you would need to reference it directly as far as like, in passage A, quote, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, perfect. I'm glad you bring that up, Capri. If you are going to use something and use it sparingly, right? You want to try to put stuff in your own words as much as possible. But if you need to cite something directly, if that was what's going to work best in that situation, use quotation marks, and that gets you off the hook as far as like, plagiarizing and not using your own ideas. It's stating something directly from the passage, right? That's what quotations are for. Okay, let's move on to the workbook. We'll get a few more passages here to try. Okay, so again, right, summarizing information. Try to identify the main ideas or themes of a piece of information. And then you're thinking about restating it, these ideas in your own words. The ability to summarize information helps clarify the most important information in a paragraph or visual element. So that's our two goals. It's basically understanding the information that we're getting as far as the civics and the history. And secondly, building that skill set so you get the most important pieces out of what you're reading. And then you just kind of can, not think about the noise. Okay. So here we got a table, right? We can also summarize things of this nature. So looking at the Bill of Rights, and this is sort of a summary, right? This is paraphrasing what's in the Bill of Rights. And I did find a Roman numeral chart to put in the Google Classroom for you guys, so you'll be able to find that on there. So it says at the top here, thinking about the title, restating the main idea is essential in an effective summary. Titles of tables often convey the main idea. From this table's title, you understand that the Bill of Rights is the main idea, right? Bill of Rights, that's in the title. I'm always harping on, make sure you understand the title. We have columns, right? The column says amendment. So our first column there is checking off 1 through 10, right, of the amendments. And then the right or rights it guarantees. That's our second column. Underneath here, it says, when summarizing a table, notice any subtitles that describe the main details the table contains. And of course, that's going to be the amendments and the rights it guarantees, right? And we talked about the 10 amendments yesterday. We'll reference that. We got like two multiple choice questions before we get to our text. So we'll be able to come back and reference this a little bit, but we know basically, number 1's freedom of speech, press, religion, assembly, right to protest against government action. 2's right to bear arms, or duty in a militia. 3, government cannot force citizens to keep soldiers in their homes during peacetime. 4, prevents government with improper searches of someone's person, property, or home. 5th was the rights of the accused. Grand jury for serious crimes cannot, double jeopardy. Those things, counsel. And number 6 guarantees a speedy and impartial trial by jury, right to an attorney, right to face accusers. 7, right to jury trial in most civil cases. 8, prohibits unreasonable high bail or fines for those accused of crimes. Outlaws cruel and unusual punishment. And here too, they're summarizing in their own words, right? We saw the text of all these of the 10 amendments yesterday. So we see here the way Paxson is actually trying to summarize. Amendment 9 states the rights of the people are not limited by what is written in the Constitution, something we talked about yesterday. And then 10 states that any rights not expressly given to the federal government are reserved to the states or to the people. And our test-taking tip. Tables present information organized into 1 or more categories. Knowing what type of information is shown can help you summarize the table's contents. And our first question here, Capri, would you like to read number 1 for us? Answer it.
Sure. It says, which of the following statements is the most accurate summary of the table? A, the table lists many rights guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. B, the table shows the exact text of the Bill of Rights. C, the table explains rights guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution. Or D, the table shows several articles of the U.S. Constitution. And the correct answer is A, the table lists many rights guaranteed by the Bill of Rights.
Right on. Yeah. So A, the table lists many rights guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. Rights. And we can eliminate the other ones. It doesn't show the exact text, or I mentioned that it's a summarization. Explains rights guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution, only in the Bill of Rights, right? And it mentions that in the title, just the Bill of Rights, not the entire Constitution. And the table shows several articles of the U.S. Constitution. Only the Bill of Rights here. We don't see the 7 articles anywhere in that passage. So A for number 1. Tracy, could you read number 2 for us?
Number 2. Which of these could be included in a summary of this table? A, the complete text of each amendment. B, the number of amendments in the Bill of Rights. C, the day when the Bill of Rights was ratified. D, examples of each of the rights as applied in everyday life. I think B, the number of
B is in boy, right? The number of amendments in the Bill of Rights. So that's included in the summary. The rest of the stuff wouldn't be a great summary, right, if we had examples of each of the rights as applied in everyday life. That's not summarizing. The dates, no, that's not, that for one, it's not in the table, and that's also a little too much detail. And A, the complete text of each amendment, also not summarizing, right? We're putting things into our own words. So B as in boy for number 2. Okay. And we're getting back into we're going to have 3, I think, of these passages to read and summarize. So I want us to do the same thing here. Take note of main ideas and main details, and I will read through it, and we'll see what we come up with here, okay? So this is, just want to mention Thomas Paine was, I mentioned some like Enlightenment thinkers and the philosophers and political thinkers that led to the American Revolution, the people that the founding father read. This guy actually became an American, well, not an American citizen. He came to the colonies right before the American Revolution. He was British, but he became a basically American. And you'll see through his writing here, the expectations. This guy was really important. One of the persons that's referenced a lot in the early days of the American Revolution. And his really important work was Common Sense that he'd written. So this passage below is an excerpt from Common Sense. It's a pamphlet. It's a little tiny book written by Thomas Paine prior to the American Revolution. In it, Mr. Paine argues for the American colonists to set up a new government separate from the British monarchy. So, what he has to say here: we have boasted the protection of Great Britain without considering that her motive was interest, not attachment, that she did not protect us from our enemies on our account, but from her enemies on her account, from those that had no quarrel with us on any other account, and who will always be our enemies on the same account. Let Britain waive her pretensions to the continent, or the continent throw off the dependence, and we should be at peace with France and Spain were they at war with Britain. So we got that fun sort of older language, older English to deal with here. And then there's always, for some reason, excuse me, we talk about nations in the feminine sense, right? So it's always her. So when they talk about her enemies being Britain, so her enemies, her own account. So thinking about this shorter passage here, what is Thomas Paine saying? And here we have an actual argument, right?
I think he's saying that we should cut alliances with Great Britain.
And what is the problem with Britain as sort of the connection between Britain and the colonies? Overall, right, his argument is that the colonies need to separate, however it is, separate, become independent, whatever you have, from Great Britain. So that's sort of the main idea. Why is that the case?
Because Great Britain is basically only protecting them from their own enemies. Hey, you guys, please. Great Britain is only protecting them for their own benefit, basically.
For their own interest, right? Yeah. So that's an idea there. That her motive was interest, not attachment. So it's not some great loyalty, right, to the colonies. It's protecting Great Britain's interest. So that's why they should separate. Specifically now, so some, well, not specifically, but who are they getting protected from? Who's mentioned here for Britain? What was that?
France and Spain.
Okay, so they're protecting the colonies from France and Spain. Okay. And so if the colonies cut their ties with Britain, what's going to happen? What's the conclusion then? Right? That's what they're saying. Let Britain waive her pretensions to the continent. That's talking about independence, right? Britain does not need to be in our, what's the word I'm looking for? Britain doesn't have to concern themselves with the colonies, right? If they waive their pretensions to the continent. So what's that going to resolve?
It kind of just like eliminates the continents from the whole battle type thing. They're
So
just omitting themselves from the problem. And they feel like maybe they won't be involved. So France and Spain won't mess with them if they leave Britain.
right, France and Spain is Britain's problem, not the colonies, right? Not America's problem. So without the connection between France or Britain and the colonies, the colonies, America could be at peace with France and Spain. Okay, so there you go. That's the main ideas, right? So he argues that the connection between the colonies and Great Britain is only in the interest of Great Britain. And so let's go ahead. We can go ahead and open up our text here. And we're only going to, again, it's a really short passage, summarizing in our own words. We're going to try to do our best to keep it succinct, not go too long here, but we got a few details that we do need to put in. So we'll say Thomas Paine argues that the connection between the colonies, and Britain, it's only in the interest of Great Britain. That's really what he starts with, right? That her motive was interest, not attachment. That she did not protect us from our enemies on our account, but from her enemies on her account. So he's arguing that the connection between the colonies and Britain is only in the interest of Great Britain. So what else would we need here? If you look at the,
He states that America should cut ties with Great Britain and end the alliance to their country.
yeah, okay. I would say we probably want to just put in. So we've pretty much we got the main idea here that he's arguing that Great Britain, without considering that her motive was interest, not attachment, that she did not protect us from our enemies on our account, but her enemies on her own account. So just restating that, saying Thomas Paine argues that the connection between the colonies and Great Britain is only the interest of Great Britain. So we've got that section. I think here, if we go down to the next couple sentences, right? So from those that had no quarrel with us on any other account, and who will always be our enemies on the same account. So, basically talking about France and Spain there, right? And he's saying that those are Britain's enemies, not the colonies, right? Not America's. So, we could put a short sentence there. Spain and France are the enemies of Great Britain. Well, go ahead. Okay, so Spain and France are the enemies of Great Britain, not America's enemies. Okay. Thomas Paine argues the connection between the colonies and Britain is only in the interest of Great Britain. Spain and France are the enemies of Great Britain, not America's enemies. And then how do we resolve that issue?
That they should cut ties with the
Yeah, we kick Britain to the curb, right? Gaining, however you want to put it, gaining America gaining independence will, allow them to be at peace with the rest of the world or other nations. That's the conclusion, right? So this is only like basically only we need here is 3 sentences. So we can say by gaining independence from Great Britain, America would be at peace with other nations. How does that sound?
Sounds good, to the point.
Okay. Everybody else getting caught up here? Everybody else following along and understand, or feel that anything's missing? I think we're pretty good, but want to see if anybody else has an opinion or anything to add. This is kind of crazy. We, haven't done any writing yet, and all of a sudden we get like, 4 examples where we need to summarize and write text. It's quite a bit different. It's some new ground, new frontier here. Okay, so before we move on, we'll just give everybody a chance. I'll read through it again, right? So Thomas Paine argues that the connection between the colonies and Britain is only in the interest of Great Britain. Why does he say that? Because Spain and France are the enemies of Great Britain, not America's enemies. And how do we resolve that? By gaining independence from Great Britain, America would be at peace with other nations. All right? Summarizing smaller text sometimes is difficult, right? When you got to condense what you're looking at into even a smaller idea. Okay. So everybody caught up? We can always come. Okay. Eddie, you good?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So this was a little bit longer, and this is about James Madison. So what it says again, right? It says read the excerpt and question below, then in a response box, write your answer. Just reviewing here. So this passage provides information about the essays known as the Fairless Papers. Sometimes you might want to read, the question beforehand when we're talking about a writing response, so you can clue yourself in as you're going. You know specifically what to ask for or what they're asking for. And again, it's write a summary of this passage, including just the key information. Give one example of information that should not be included in the summary. So we're going to look for some details that would not be part of the summary. Incorporate relevant and specific evidence from the excerpt and your own knowledge of the issue and the circumstances surrounding the events leading to the establishment of the U.S. system of government. And right, so some background. We know that this big stack of Federalist Papers are written. A lot of them written by Alexander Hamilton. There was a few other writers as well, but the idea was supporting the Constitution. It was the main idea behind the writing of the Federalist Papers. Okay, so start here. After the Constitution was sent to the states for ratification, James Madison was one of 3 prominent Americans who wrote essays to help people understand the new form of government and to encourage support for the Constitution. These 85 essays were known as the Federalist Papers. They described the structure and function of the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government. They also explained how the new government would conduct trade, provide defense, and earn revenue. Many newspapers published the essays to make them available to the people who had different opinions about the Constitution. Okay, so that's the idea behind the Fairless Papers. Now we're going to look at a particular one, or ideas from a particular one. This isn't the actual text, but just what was written in it. In Federalist number 37, Madison described the difficulties faced by the delegates in their efforts to draft the Constitution. First, there were no precedents for them to follow. Direct democracy, in which all laws were created by a direct vote, would not be suitable for a fledgling nation. A monarchy governed by a single hereditary ruler was what they fought against in the American Revolution. What the nation needed was a representative democracy governed by elected officials who took the needs of the people into account. They only knew that the existing confederation was weak and that they must try to avoid the past errors of other nations. In addition, delegates had to design a stable government that provided security and enforced laws while ensuring personal liberty. Finally, the appropriate balance of power between the national and state governments had to be found. Madison concluded the essay with his opinion on the reasons for the convention's success. There was little divisiveness along political party lines. The delegates knew the importance of sacrificing personal interest for the greater good. In its earliest stages, as the Federalist Papers, James Madison's essay outlined the foundational ideals that would evolve into the presidential democracy of modern America. A little bit of a longer passage there. Okay, so what do we need to add?
We can say that in Madison's essay, he encourages support for the Constitution.
Yeah. So yeah, we could talk generally about the Fairless Papers, right? We wouldn't need to get into a lot of detail, but we could put something like the Federalist Papers were written to explain and support the Constitution, something like that. And then we could say specifically about James Madison, right? So we can mention this particular document. So Federalist 37, whatever, just we'll reference Federalist number 37. Madison, what is he actually, what exactly is he talking about?
The benefit of democracy, a representative democracy.
What else? What are some other points here? What's that topic sentence at the beginning say?
Madison described the difficulties faced by the delegates in their effort to draft the Constitution.
Okay, so the benefits of a representative democracy, and right before that, the difficulties, right? The difficulties in in creating a new government, right? The difficulties in creating a new government. And this is really important. Because just like what it's saying there, right? There's no modern precedent. There's nothing in their time, because basically, you know, particularly in Europe, it's all monarchies. It's all, you know, kings that are at the head of state. So they're like that was something that was certainly, you know, not going to happen. We are not going to have a king in the colonies or in the republic, the new, you know, United States. So they had it. That was the first thing, that the K word, king, that was not allowed, right? They even I think somebody at some point when they're talking about, well, what are we going to call the head of our country, and somebody's like, that's called a king, and everybody's like, no. So they, you know, that word is not going to happen. Really important. But the whole idea that, you know, there hasn't been democracy around in thousands of years until you look at like the Republic of Rome and democracy of Greece. So they got to, you know, cobble this all together. That's where, you know, guys like from the Enlightenment that we talked about, right? The social contract, all of that had to come into play to make the new government. They you know, reviewed, they read those, you know, Jean-Jacques Rousseau and John Locke and Thomas Hobbes and all those guys to form the government. What's going to be best? So that's the next point, right? So the idea here is that, you know, Madison is talking about the difficulties in creating a new government, the benefits of a representative democracy. What else should we put in here?
I'm going to show how it ensures personal liberties.
The individual liberties, is that what you said?
It shows how it ensures personal liberties.
Okay, so ensuring, you know, personal liberties was part of it. Okay, and so to conclude then, we know, you know, basically the conventions succeeded because what it says here, you know, little divisiveness along the political party lines. Delegates knew the importance of sacrificing personal interests for the greater good. And in its earliest stages, as the Federalist Papers, James Madison's essay outlined the foundational ideals that would evolve into the presidential democracy of modern America. So how do we conclude? So we could say, like, you know, their efforts led to the creation of modern democracy in America, right? Okay. All right. So let's see how we can put this together then. So we could start with the Fairless Papers. Were written, were to explain and garner support. Garner being gaining for the new that talks broadly about the reason for the Federalist Papers, right? And then specifically, we can talk about Federalist number 37. In Federalist number 37, James Madison explains how the new government was formed.
You say he,
Go ahead.
let's say, you say he explains the benefit of representative democracy.
Okay, James Madison explains the benefits of representative, did not spell that right. Okay, representative. Democracy. Okay. We can make this a compound sentence, and also say so. James Madison explains the benefits of representative democracy and the difficulties in creating a new government. Of that. And I think that's really the two main ideas that we get from Fairless number 37, right? And we could also say,
Do you want to include the fact that it discusses the three branches of government that we still have today?
okay, let's see. So we could say, I want to say, we need to put in something about there's no precedent, right? There's nothing before it, and creating something new. So, I know it would fall right after that. So, explaining, James Madison explains the benefits of representative democracy, the difficulties in creating a new government, the delegates. There was no, what was I say?
It's like no reference or blueprint.
There you go. There you go. I like it. I like it. The delegates had no reference to a, what do you use here? To a delegates had no reference to a Representative. Yeah, let's go ahead and say representative democracy. Representative democracy. To help them. Right. And then we should probably, so in this last sort of part here, the essay, with his opinion on the reasons for the convention's success. So his opinion was the reason for its success, right, was that there was little divisiveness along political party lines, and the delegates knew the importance of sacrificing interests for the greater good. So we need to put, why was it successful? So we could, and we should reference, that it's basically Madison's opinion. So Madison believed the convention was successful because delegates put aside differences and how can we put that? So put aside differences for a more important matter. Okay. So that just about covers everything. So what we have, right, is an idea about the Fairless Papers to explain and garner support for the new government. Madison explains the benefits of representative democracy and the difficulties in creating a new government. Why was that difficult? Because the delegates had no reference to a representative democracy to help them. And why was it successful? Madison believed the convention was successful because delegates put aside differences for a more important matter. Okay. Now there was one thing that was different in our directions here, right? It's asking us to incorporate or give one example of information that should not be included in the summary. So if that is our summary, right, the Federalist Papers were written to explain and garner support for the new government. In Fairless number 37, James Madison explains the benefits of representative democracy and the difficulties in creating a new government. The delegates had no reference to a representative democracy to help them. Madison believed the convention was successful because delegates put aside differences for a more important matter. We need to throw a detail in there at the end to cover all our bases. So what would be an example of information that we wouldn't include? What's a detail? What's something that's less significant that we could put in here?
I use the last sentence in the first paragraph as mine.
Last sentence, many newspapers publish the essays to make them available to the people. Yeah. So yeah, that would be, yeah, that's perfect. That's not relevant, right? Same thing like these, like 85 essays. That would also be something that would be a minor detail, not relevant, not part of the big picture, but we could put that in there. So we just need to throw in, so like, what to say, many newspapers publish the essays should not be included in the summary. Any newspapers publish the essays should not, there we go, be included in the summary. So short and sweet, hitting the main points. What are the Fairless Papers? What was Fairless Paper number 37? That covers it. We'll have one more. So how's everybody doing? Are we caught up on this one? Anybody need more time?
I need a little bit more time.
Okay.
Okay.
Good to go. Okay. And the next one will be the same thing. Let's look at the directions first. So this one's going to be a little simpler, I think. Write a summary of the two interpretations of this cartoon. Incorporate relevant and specific evidence from the cartoon, the information, and your own knowledge of the issue and the circumstances surrounding the events leading to the American Revolution. So, we have the cartoon here. The text is going to be what's really important, but, you need to understand what the cartoon looks like. And what we have in the text. So it says, this political cartoon first appeared in Benjamin Franklin's Pennsylvania Gazette in 1754 and was widely reprinted. The pieces of the snake represent several colonies and the region of New England. At first, the cartoon referred to an early plan for uniting the British colonies in North America. Franklin thought that unified colonies could help Britain win the conflict with France over land west of the British colonies. Like the snake cut into pieces, the colonies risked death by remaining separate. At the same time, many people believed a popular superstition that putting the pieces of a snake back together before sunset would bring the snake back to life. Later, after passage of the Stamp Act and other events leading to the American Revolution, patriots revived the cartoon to support the cause of independence. Now, here's a little, here's an instance where prior knowledge is going to be necessary. So we have to remember some dates, right? 1754, 22 years before we declare independence, right? So, what was happening at that time, then you get into the context. British colonies, so the pieces of the snake represent several colonies of the region. Right here, Franklin thought that unified colonies could help Britain win the conflict with France over land west of the British colonies. We're talking about the 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War, as is kind of more commonly known in here. The 7 Years' War kind of applies to the larger global war between France and Britain at the time. So you got to remember, right? We're talking about a few decades before the American Revolution is when this is first printed. Then when we get into, when it is rehashed, when it comes back around, thinking about the Stamp Act and the things leading into the American Revolution, right? So the context is going to change. The reason it becomes popular again is going to change. So what then are the main ideas for Ben Franklin and the cartoon here? What can we throw together? So we have to sort of summarize the two times that this became relevant, right? So we probably should reference at least the date 1754, right? As far as the first time that it appeared. So we want to throw in something about 1754 is when the cartoon first appeared. And so what was important about the first time that it appeared?
It was saying that if basically the interpretation was that if the colonies joined together, they'd be more powerful.
So in both cases, right, the main idea, if you're just looking at the cartoon, is that joining together and being united, they will be stronger, right, and they'll survive. That's really important. Now, the reasons for that each time is different, right? So the idea is that why were they uniting in 1754?
Franklin thought that unified colonies could help Britain win the conflict.
There you go. And that's exactly what happened. But so the United Colonies would aid Britain in their fight against France. Okay, so that was his idea behind the first, idea. And then it reappears around the time of the American Revolution, leading into the American Revolution, the Stamp Act, the stuff that was happening. So what's the vibe then? Why are they, why did the cartoon become important again?
It became a symbol of independence.
Right, uniting against Britain. So, in real simple terms, right? The first time it appears, it's uniting for Britain. The second time it appears, it's uniting to become independent from Britain or against Britain, right? So, little compare and contrast there. Okay, so we'll put it together. We really should start with the date, right? Because it's important here all the time. So
In 1754, Benjamin Franklin's Join or Die political cartoon was published and had two interpretations.
slow down. In 1754.
Already.
Okay. All right. So you said in 1754.
Benjamin Franklin's Join or Die political cartoon.
All right. Put join or die in stations. Political cartoon.
Was published.
Okay.
And had two interpretations.
And had two interpretations. Okay. All right. First part. What happened in 1754? Benjamin Franklin, Join or Die political cartoon was published and had two interpretations. So I guess next is going to be what those interpretations were, right? That's what we need to follow into. That's our topic sentence. That's the main idea. All right. What do you got, Capri?
In the first interpretation, it was for the colonies to join together. I don't know how to word it correctly though.
Okay, here we go. In its first, we can shorten this up. Okay, in its first appearance. the cartoon referred to the, no. Cartoon symbolized, like that. Cartoon symbolized the American colonies uniting to help Britain win against France over land disputes.
Do you want to mention the stronger together part, or does not necessary?
I think that's going to be, that's implied, right? We see, you know, because we're, you know, whoever is, the idea is that the person has a, you know, is looking at the image and then reading our text along with it, you know. So if, like, imagine you're at a museum, you know, you're like the Smithsonian History Museum in DC, and this is on display, and you know, you're like, oh, this was, you know, in 1754, Benjamin Franklin, you know. So the person that's going to be reading this as an explanation is going to have that available to look at, right? They're going to have that context and reference. So yeah, I think we could probably leave out the part about, you know, join or die, or you know, the sort of survival element. So yeah, so in its first appearance, the cartoon symbolized the American colonies uniting to help Britain win against France over land disputes. So then, well, you know what? Yeah, let's put the death, or see, colonies risked death. Put that in quotation marks, by not joining together. In 1754, Ben Franklin, Join or Die, a political cartoon, was published and had two interpretations. In its first appearance, the cartoon symbolized the American colonies uniting to help Britain win against France over land disputes. Okay. And then, like you said, Capri, yeah, the colonies risked death by not joining together. I think you're right. You know, we need to sort of give a little bit of explanation of what the cartoon actually means, right? Not just what Ben Franklin or the Gazette. I don't know if he actually was the, you know, was the illustrator of the cartoon, but it was printed as newspaper. So we do need to give some explanation of what they're looking at. On second thought, I think you were right there. Okay, so yeah, so they risk death, right? They're going to fall apart by not joining together, which is also what's going to happen next, right? So then what do we follow up with, right? We've explained why the cartoon appeared first. Then we explained sort of what the cartoon symbolizes. What else do we need? Move on to the second telling, or the second life of the cartoon. What can we put next?
You can say something like that. The illustration later became a symbol of independence after the Stamp Act.
Okay. So we can maybe condense that a little bit. We don't necessarily have to reference the Stamp Act. We can talk generally about leading into the American Revolution. So So like leading, well, we could just say leading into the, oh man, I have all over this. Leading to the American Revolution, comma, the cartoon was defined to symbolize, we need to symbolize again, support for, how about to symbolize the colonies uniting in its fight for independence from Britain. What do you think?
Sounds good.
Y'all like it?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So when you're at, I don't even know, I don't know why I said the Smithsonian History Museum, but if it's there, when you take your kids there someday, you can look at it and go, yeah, well, in 1754, Ben Franklin's Join or Die political cartoon was published and had two interpretations. In its first appearance, the cartoon symbolized the American colonies uniting to help Britain win against France over land disputes. The colonies risked death by not joining together. Leading into the American Revolution, the cartoon was revived to symbolize the colonies uniting in its fight for independence. Okay. How's everybody doing? Anybody need more time to catch up? I want to take that as a no. Everybody feeling good about this and got all their answers? Again, this is different because it's not going to be scored like our other tests are and everything. So it's just, it'll just be there for our reference. Okay. So just to follow up, our first two answers there, one was A and two was B. That was the only actual questions we had. You can also look, if you wanted to flip through, it has the rubrics again, right? It has all the information as far as what it was looking for, and it gives their sort of idea of what should be in a summary, right? So just like, we could look real quick here. I am thinking we are at like 2:05. Language arts might not be happening today if you guys are cool with that, because by the time we took a break and came back, we would be over 3 o'clock if we were to get into language arts. So we might not be doing it today. I just want to point out here again, you get what they should you should have in a summary, right? So like with the Thomas Paine, it said that we feel good about our connection with Great Britain and the protection it gives us against countries such as France and Spain. We had that, right, as far as it was about Britain's interest, not the American interest. They're actually Britain's enemies, not ours. If we cut our ties with Britain, our government would be at peace with these other nations. Exactly what we had, right? A response earning a top score would clearly identify the enduring issue as Great Britain's interest in its own country as opposed to its interest in its colonies. That's exactly what we did, right? So same thing here. We'll look real quick what they have for the summary on the Fairless Papers. Summary should include this key information. The essays known as the Fairless Papers were written to encourage support for the new Constitution. The essays explain the form and function of the government, right? We put some of that in there. Fairless number 37 described how the delegates to the Constitutional Convention were able to succeed in drafting the Constitution in spite of the difficulties that they encountered. Information that should not be in the summary is the fact that many newspapers published the essays, right? That's insignificant. It's a minor detail. Okay. Then finally, number 5, okay? a summary should suggest that if the colonies joined together, they would be powerful and succeed in their cause, right? Uniting together, we survive. We got that in there. However, if they squabbled with one another and were not joined or united, they would be powerless and their cause would die. With specific regard to this prompt about the effect of the join or die cartoon, a response earning a top score would clearly identify the enduring issue that the new colonies must fight together against their common enemy, Britain, and not fight against one another. Okay, I think we did a pretty good job here. That is a lot to take in for today. I didn't think it was going to be quite so long. But go ahead. I think we can stop recording.